This is No Operating Manual, a podcast about building healthcare companies when there's no one clear path and no operations manual. My guest today is Derek Baird, co-founder and CEO of Switchboard Health. For nearly 2 decades, Derek has focused on helping clinicians make better decisions, starting with the tools that supported evidence-based care inside health systems. With Switchboard Health, he's now working on ways to use AI to help clinicians route patients to the right specialist at the right time. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Erin. Glad to be here.
So to start us off, in your own words, tell us about Switchboard Health. What problem is Switchboard trying to solve?
Switchboard solving a problem that unfortunately most of us are all too familiar with, which is either through your PCP's recommendation or your own journey, you realize you need to see a specialist, or you think or suspect you may need to see a specialist, and thus begins a confusing, surprising, usually in bad ways, expensive and challenging journey to find the right specialist, to get in to see them, to understand the right next steps. And boy, if you need multiple specialists coordinating, then all bets are really off. And so our goal is to connect patients with great specialty care. So that mission is really easy to say, but as most of us as patients ourselves or dads or caregivers, I think most of us understand that's really easy to say, but often pretty tough to pull off. So Switchboard aims to make that better for all of us.
So how specifically does Switchboard do that? That's different than what's currently happening. How do you end up, making it easier and less costly for folks to utilize specialty care?
Yeah, there's a few ways. The most common way is through our work with primary care groups, so that if I go to see my internal medicine physician here in Boise, and he says, "Hey, Derek, you really need to see a neurologist for these startup CEO headaches that won't go away." Today, that maybe means and I love my internal medicine doc in case he ever watches this, so don't get the wrong idea. But often what that means is, he'll say, "Hey, go see Dr. Jim. He's fantastic." Yeah. Or the primary care doc will say, "Okay, go find an in-network neurologist and, good luck and Godspeed." And instead with the switchboard, what we do is we look at Derek's EMR data and say, all right, based on Derek's where he lives, what insurance he has, the nature of his care needs, so needs to see a neurologist, referring diagnosis is headaches. We then look at all the neurologists. Unfortunately, there aren't too many of them here. But we look at all the neurologists around Boise, and then based on all those factors, the switchboard quickly identifies, okay, who's close by, who's in network, who's high quality, including who's good at treating patients with headaches, because I don't want to go to Dr. Famous, super well-known neurosurgeon for low-grade chronic headaches. So who's good at treating patients like me? And where the heck can I actually get in with a wait time that's measured in days, not months? And so all that's happening right then and there in the middle of the EMR. So instead of just sending me out to wander the wilderness, no wonder 40% of patients give up along the way. I'm given very specific, like this is who you need to go see, and optionally, like we've already secured some available appointment slots for you. That's what the switchboard enables compared to the woeful status quo.
Okay, got it. So when you think back, when you were a high school senior and you're like, I'm heading off to college, and what I want to do with my life is I'm going to be the CEO of a company that helps provide better specialty care. Again, obviously that's not something going through a 17, 18-year-old's head. So when did you know that this was kind of the direction that you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, I stumbled into healthcare technology. I wasn't 17, but I was still quite young. So I was an undergrad in Seattle and took an internship with a startup EMR vendor and just got hooked on healthcare. It was clear there were a lot of problems that needed to be solved. And technology, even though I was a finance major, there was something about technology that I just found really appealing and kind of scratched some nerdy itches that I guess I had that I didn't realize I had. And so for the, 2+ decades since, all I've been doing is working in healthcare technology. I remember, I was probably 23 years old. I remember as an EMR product manager hearing and learning about how specialty care referrals, how those went down, and being both confused and a bit alarmed at the same time. But as a 23-year-old, like, I didn't have a lot of personal experience, thankfully, with specialty care journeys. I hadn't really been on the wrong end of it. But I do remember that. And then about 10 years later, when doing work in clinical decision support, it popped up again. And then 5 years later, was actually part of a consulting engagement for large health systems around referral management. And it hasn't changed that much, which is a bad thing. This is one of the like stubborn, woeful status quos that is maybe just as bad, if not worse, than it was 20+ years ago. And so this has, I look back and it's like, yeah, this has kept popping up along the way. And so when the idea for Switchboard was coming together, and by now as either the patient, the caregiver, or the guy footing the bill, by now I've got a lot of personal energy and passion and experience around this issue. And so when Switchboard was coming together, I said, hey, I know enough about that problem. I know it's been around for a long time. And I've got a lot of fuel in the tank and personal energy around making it better. So not quite the 17-year-old who was being that thoughtful, but this was already on my radar a few years later.
It's actually quite common, I'm finding, with healthcare founders, CEOs, to come out of that finance background where you go from, because it is a financial problem, right? Like, to try to solve that, to make it less cumbersome as you're doing, but also to make it more cost effective. So it totally makes sense that finance degree led you to an internship into digital health. After years of advising and investing in digital health companies, like, why build again? What was that calling?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I never stopped building, right? So lest the viewers here get the wrong idea. It's not like I was a professional investor or advisor for years. That was really night and weekend activity. In addition to my day job. And so I've always been building and really largely on the commercial side of the company. So, I've led product, I've led marketing, I've led sales, I've led client success, then eventually you get enough gray hairs, they let you lead some combination thereof. What's different with Switchboard is this is my first true founder and CEO role. And so I've always been building, but this is capital B building, and comes with, there's more to it than there has been in my prior career stops. But I think advising and investing, it was part of the learning process that I think made me more prepared to be a founder. I mean, I've been advising founders, I wasn't quite qualified to do it, but I've been advising founders and sitting on boards and part of the startup action for many years, often just sitting back and absorbing and learning. And so by the time I made that my day job, there was more pattern recognition there than I think there would have been otherwise. It was a great gift being able to not only have my day job experiences, but meet some fantastic people and have exposure to other CEO level problems, dynamics, successes, so that by the time I actually stepped into the role, I think that learning had compounded in a really helpful way for me. So it was worth those nights and weekends.
Yeah, on the job training there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Switchboard launched in 2022, and they're with the product in market, 3 years ago, 2023. It's now 2026, and there's a lot of noise around AI in healthcare. What is different about what's happening now in this moment than maybe when you first launched?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are different. I mean, I just think the rate of change continues to increase. And so one example of that is, we will soon sunset our original product, which is, depending on how you count, about 3.5 years old, which is, traditionally that would not be long in the tooth for a software application. But given the tools, components, approaches, models, and technologies that are available to us today that weren't available in 2022, it's clear that we needed to make use of those and take advantage of those, to keep up with the rate of change. And so I find that really exciting and exhilarating. Like, it's a great time to be building. I think there is a risk, there's greater risk than ever of companies and technology leaders and CEOs not maintaining the requisite pace. So I do think there's an increased challenge and responsibility and burden to keep up with everything that's so dynamic right now. And so I think you could either choose to embrace that and see that as a wonderful thing, or unfortunately, I think you're going to be on the wrong end of that dynamic, because the time frame for obsolescence, both for products, people, and companies, has just really, really compacted. And so I think a lot about that. I don't want to become obsolete. And so that keeps me doing everything I can to stay in front on the learning curve and on the technology innovation curve.
So the 3 years, you're right, that is a very short amount of time for a product to be in market and then to sunset it. So what changed? What meaningfully changed about the product itself?
Well, I mean, I guess there's two things. Yeah. One is we've learned a lot. And so now I think we're better positioned to do what is essentially a rebuild, because we've got nearly 4 years of learnings, both positive and negative, in doing this work, for thousands upon thousands of patients and a growing number of clients. I think the other part of it is just, again, on the technology front, if you just sort of think about the last 6 months, like last summer, it was pretty fashionable to say, like, OpenAI has won, like among the frontier models and the general models, like OpenAI's got a lead and people aren't going to catch up. Right. So, that was a pretty common refrain 6 months ago or 9 months ago. And then, Google leapfrogged OpenAI in a really big way. And, and suddenly everybody's saying, the empire strikes back, and now Gemini's in it to win it. And, they're going to be the world conqueror on the AI front. And then Christmas vacation hit and everybody's playing around with Claude and co-work. And right now the prevailing wisdom is they've got a large lead. And so I just think I think that's going to keep happening. And so it just shows you how dynamic things are right now. And, our replatforming today, sets us up for a future where we can just make use of these great components, these great models, these great technologies, no matter who happens to be doing it best, on any given holiday break. And I think that's going to be important, not just for the next 6 months, but for the next 6 years. Mm-hmm. And so, when you build a platform in 2022, when none of these things are, on the shelf, it makes it really, really hard to set yourself up for what we now know in 2026. So a lot has changed. Again, I think in a good way.
So you recently won the Microsoft Rural Health AI Lab Pitch Competition. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Tell us what that is and the impact it will have on Switchboard and rural health.
Yeah, so this is a great project involving a few companies. So you've got the American Hospital Association, and every year they have a fantastic rural health summit that I've attended over the years. And so they're throwing some weight behind and understand, maybe more so than anybody, the need for these commonly small rural health facilities to innovate. You've got Microsoft that is contributing people and resources to drive that evolution and adoption. You've got Scale Health, which is a great convener of cohorts of provider organizations and hospitals, all saying, hey, let's get 6 to 8 rural health providers together, many of whom are, critical access hospitals. Let's look at problem areas, and then let's throw some money, some energy, and some people behind helping them adopt new technologies that can really support their strategies. Referrals are a big part of that. Referrals are hard anywhere in the country, but we're still watching Winter Olympics highlights here. And so if you think about a specialty care referral in Boise being, a triple axle, right? It's hard. It's difficult to pull off and stick the landing. If you're in rural America and there are no neurologists within 200 miles, like that's a quad. You're adding another twist in there. And so, being able to support providers in places where this is harder than anywhere is really important and in line with our mission. And so we're happy to be working with AHA, Microsoft, Scale Health, and these hospitals to avoid 200-mile drives to city centers for visits that don't need to happen, right? Or 4-hour drives to see a specialist who's actually not very good at the thing that you commuted for, when a virtual visit could be just as effective, or you could actually be managed locally without having to go see Dr. Famous in Boise. So there's just, there's 10 use cases everywhere. I think in rural America, you can tack another 5 or 6 onto the list in ways that, we've just got to improve the status quo.
So how does that impact Switchboard from a business? Like, does that add some contracts to your arsenal? Like, what does that mean next for you? And also for the hospitals, like, how does that integration happen?
Yeah, I mean, it does. We'll have some new, we'll be fortunate and really grateful to have some new clients coming out of this initiative. So we'll soon be doing work with some of these rural health hospitals, which if we do right by then, this is a pretty close-knit community and group. So, if you show that you're doing right by at least a few of them, word gets out and they're all looking to each other as peers for tools, technologies, and ways to innovate. I think this is opening up a new market segment for us that is, that's tough to do from a standing start. So this is giving us a bit of a running start in having some real projects, and we're going to publish at least one case study from it. So really excited about showing what we can do to help people in all parts of the country.
So building in healthcare right now, it's almost essential that AI is part of the language, and also, virtual care. So tell me about the impact of those. What you talked about, how you had to sunset your product. How does that, how does AI as a tool become part of what's core infrastructure in order to deliver on virtual care? Or is it just, I'm trying to get at, like, how do you build a product on something that as a tool has to be integrated for the long term to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that's part of the choice to re-platform rather than try and just sprinkle some AI spice on top of the existing product, which we could certainly do, right? You can hang a few AI use cases off of something that was built not even 4 years ago, 10 years ago. And, we did a little bit of that for specific use cases like, voice AI to gather specialist availability. And that's worked well. But it just became really clear to us that to build something that is going to age well and not look long in the tooth in 4 years, and to build something that can support 80 AI-enabled use cases, not just 2 or 3, and to build something that is durable and gives us some freedom of motion, you got to start over. And you've got to really pay attention to having an architecture and an orchestration layer that allows you to be AI native rather than we just, we after the fact sprinkled some AI spice or pixie dust on things. And so now really one of the core drivers of the switchboard are agents, not only identifying the right next best step for a patient with a specialty care need, but then just automatically running the next process, which is, okay, Derek, go see Dr. Sarah. Great. Let's go get you booked with Dr. Sarah. Let's remind you of that booking with Dr. Sarah. Let's retrieve that consult note from Dr. Sarah. Let's ingest that care plan and see if you now need to see Dr. Susie after Dr. Sarah. And we're able to do all of that through this new AI native engine that, again, just none of this existed 4 years ago. And so if you really want to power this in a thoughtful way, it can't just be on a superficial level.
I'm meeting with a lot of founders, CEOs who care navigation is the core of everything that they're doing. And it seems like that is a huge theme throughout startups right now. So tell me about why that is so important to cost savings and patient experience.
Yeah, I mean, first off, that's a great thing that people are recognizing that, it's in these interstitial steps and it's in the in-betweens that a lot of things fall apart.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. Those with thoughtful care models and those paying attention to where patients get stuck, lost, confused, discouraged, realize that, wow, care navigation in between the visits, in between the formal engagement is often the right prescription for what's ailing the patient in their care journey. I think the challenge is if you're doing that in a 100% or 80% human powered way, it's very tough to scale and it's really expensive. And so where we see our role is in turbocharging and tech enabling these care navigation teams and people so that they can just get a lot more done in an automated way without always having to rely on their care navigation team picking up the phone or deciding to run a report, or we've got to replace some of the labor expense with capital here in order to be able to do this at the scale that patients need. But that's only possible because companies are realizing how important care navigation is, and then we're grateful to provide the tech that turbocharges it.
So if Switchboard becomes embedded in care, across the spectrum, rural health or whatever, what changes for the patient? And what will things look like for the patient 5 years from now?
Boy, I hope a lot changes. I think, right now, I don't know what the opposite of a white glove experience is, but that the experience today, which is, here's a recommendation for my golfing buddy, or go figure it out yourself, which usually prompts a phone call to me from a family member saying, what is a rheumatologist and how do I find one? That's, I think everybody understands how that has to change. But I think just making it a little bit better is not the answer either. So I will be really disappointed if that 40% patient give up rate stays stubbornly stuck at 30%. For us, the North Star is patients actually feel like this is a white glove concierge level experience where they are being guided in a natural, easy way that isn't putting the burden on them to ensure that they're not only pointed in the right direction toward a high value specialist, but there's actually a lot of support, both human and tech, that's kicking in to make sure that they get there. And just someone saying, wow, that was really, really easy. That for me, that is the goal. It is absolutely achievable. I do think we're going to get there. And, that's what keeps us bouncing out of bed in the morning at Switchboard is the opportunity to play a part in getting to not just a little bit better place on this, but a much, much better place.
Well, I can imagine that, 40% are abandoning going to a specialist because it's so hard to find a specialist, or it's just, not finding the right person, that the cost of care goes up exponentially because of delayed care, right? Have you guys run the numbers on that? Like, what is the dollar amount that the health system is taking on because of this kind of fragment of the system?
Yeah, I mean, it's alarming. So it is on a per patient level for some of these care gaps that the data are clear. If that care gap just persists and continues to go unmet, there's an egg timer. And when that egg timer goes off, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars of cost. And it's often a terrible event for the patient who's then, knocked way off track. And, these are life-changing events and byproducts of you giving up on seeing a cardiologist 2 years earlier because it was just too darn hard. And so both at a human level and an economic level, the impact is severe. So I think, people are more and more aware of that and realizing that it's not about the rescue mission that happens once the patient is knocked off their clinical trajectory. It's actually about doing the right thing 2 years prior, because then they're just on a completely different path from the start.
Becomes the standard.
That's right.
So wrapping this up, what is one piece of advice that you'd offer founders as a founder who are jumping in at this moment in time?
I mean, the snarky answer is don't do it. So why don't I give you a little more? What I would say is, I think now more so than any other time, like there's a real, and this is a good thing, right? There's a real appeal and allure to being a founder. I think that's great. We need that entrepreneurial spirit, and it's a great time to be building. I hope that enthusiasm and optimism is coming through here. Like this is a fantastic time to be building in tech. But the reason for my initial response is my advice would be before you take the leap, talk to 10 founders, 10 of early stage companies, right? Who are 2, 3, 4 years in, and find a way to get beyond the like, hey, how's it going? Because, they're going to tell you it's going great and they're growing, and right. And even when that's true, there's a couple levels below that. And I think the important level is, and again, I had the benefit of seeing this firsthand through investing, advising, sitting in boardrooms. I still don't think I totally knew what I was in for, but I think it was probably like eyes more wide open than most, right? But talk to the 10 founders and try and get a feel for what their days and weeks are like at an individual level, right?
What's that going to tell them?
That's going to tell them what they are opting into. And I would talk to some founders that, if you talk to 10, you're going to meet both companies that are on a great trajectory and some that are not going to make it. And so I think just understanding, particularly for the companies that are on a great trajectory, like what is it? What is the day in the life of a founder for a young company that's growing, or a young company that's stalled out, or a young company that's not going to make it? Because it's a lot. And so I just think knowing that before you get in, rather than being surprised by it 6 months in, that's my only bit of advice. And if after having those 10 conversations, you're like, all right, let's go, then by all means go, because it is a really, really fun time to be building in tech. But
so as a founder, then what does the week look like for you? So let's say I'm a founder. I'm asking this question.
Yeah, I mean, it is full on all the time. I mean, all the time, right? So it's last night, at a Starbucks while my kid's playing soccer. The Starbucks is closed, so I'm sitting on the patio, freezing my tail off, but still on their Wi-Fi, working away, right? I mean, that true story. That's literally last night. And on the phone, it's not just me, right? On the phone with the team after hours. And I would say the 996 has become a fashionable way of thinking about, the commitment to a startup. So, right. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. But I think for founders, it's more, it has to be more than that. And so maybe the other piece of advice is the only way you're going to be able to sustain that is if you have serious, like a deep well of energy and passion around what you're working on. Otherwise, you will burn out because it is so much. But if that energy for the mission and what you're doing can outweigh the tension headaches that emerge on a Friday night, you're going to be okay, because you'll keep at it. The grit will win out over the loss of a social life and the time and energy investment that's required. So all that to say, I absolutely love it. That balance works for me, but it's a lot of sacrifice, and I think better to know that getting in, talk to some folks who will give you the honest truth about what parking lots they're hanging out in.
Derek, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and everything about Switchboard. I look forward to following everything that you guys have going on.
Great. Thanks so much, Erin.
Thanks for listening to No Operating Manual. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and a review, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. No Operating Manual is hosted and produced by Erin O'Brien of Chemistry, a healthcare marketing and communication advisory. Visit our website at choosechemistry.com.